Yo, what's good, guys? We are back at it again. This time we're ranking the best pitchers that we've had all year. The way I'm doing this basically is if I think they have an argument to be in the best team in the game, they're S tier. If I think they're good and if you have a personal preference towards them, they'll be A tier. And if they're B tier, then they're fine, or they're very niche pitchers that find a spot. Obviously, if you're on the list, this is the best pitchers of the year. You're not a bad pitcher. But in general, just wanted to put this out there as a resource for people that may be new to the game or took a break or maybe grinded all year and you still don't really know what you're looking for with pitchers. Here we go. Here it is. Let's get into it. So, Loop, S tier. Probably the best lefty specialist we've had all year. He's not BP against righties either, so that's a huge plus for him. Love him for that reason. This Ottavino card can be very good, can be very volatile. His control is not the greatest. He gets huge bars on certain pitches, like I believe his changeup. I think he has a changeup, and the sinker have big pars. So on higher difficulties, he's going to be a problem. But he has that arm slot and he throws hard, so he's a good pitcher regardless. This Wainwright, I'm not super high on. I'm not putting him in my best rotation in the game. I'm sure for some people he will be there. It's just for me, I don't really see it with the card. I've used him and he's been good enough to where I could see it, but in general, I don't think he's got that oomph to make the top tier. Burnett throws a hard fastball and throws some decent complimentary pitches, but just not really all there. More of like a budget option. Lighter, S tier. If you haven't used this card, you might not understand. You might look at the card and say, oh, he's got bad control. He doesn't throw that hard. His pitches don't go together great. He doesn't have a change. There's a lot to knock with Leiter if you don't know how to pitch with him or if you just haven't used him. He's a very interesting pitcher to use, and he is brutal to face on higher difficulties. He will be in my rotation come the best team in the game video, which will be the next thing after set 6 drops. Chapman, another awesome lefty specialist. The par on the sinker is a little bit too big for me. I wish it was a little better, but at the end of the day, it is Aroldis Chapman. And he was not renowned for having awesome control, so I do get it. This is one of the more interesting Chapmans we've ever gotten in the show because he basically has every pitch he's ever thrown in his career on one card, which is crazy. And it makes him very good. It's just if he had better control, he'd be almost unhittable. This Billy Wagner is fine as a lefty specialist. For me, you wouldn't really pitch him to righties ever. I think the slider is just BP. I can't think of one slider in the game where as soon as it comes out of his hand, you are certain that it's a slider and no other pitch than this Billy Wagner. So I don't really like him for that reason. This Snell is fine. Every time I haven't gone against him just because I haven't been playing that much, but I have watched people go against him, and he looks like BP. He does not look good by any means. Statistically is very good, and his pitching repertoire isn't bad, but it's also not great. I'm not a huge fan of guys that have a slurve and a slider. I feel like it's redundant. I don't really love that. Bob Gibson, I'm sure will be at the top of a lot of people's list. I think he is personally going to age poorly, and he's going to get lit up. I said it in the first season that the game was out, that I called him BP Bob for a reason. I don't think he's very good. Especially on higher difficulties. His pars are massive, and all he really has going for him is the outlier fastball. His slider's not that good. It's really just a fastball and the changeup you're working with him. I don't think he's going to age very well when people inevitably bring him back because I know a lot of people have liked him this year. Camilo Doval, I've been saying it. On Hall of Fame, he's all right. On Legend, the card is nasty. So this is more for Legend than any other difficulty. I would not pitch this card if you're on like All-Star or something. But on Legend, he is filth. Chris Martin, awesome little, not even really a budget option because he's an event reward, and event rewards are a ridiculous amount right now. But if you want to go grind out 5 or 10 wins and pick him out of a rewind pack, then that is your prerogative, and you can do it. I don't think he's a bad pick. Having a splitter as a reliever, having a 5-pitch mix as a reliever is a rare thing. It's just his through nines just aren't the greatest, especially for basically the in game. This card, Chris Sale, he's really a gimmick card. It's all about the arm slot. He doesn't throw particularly hard. His pitches aren't really that good. It's just more about the arm slot, and once you get over that, he's not BP, but he's not very good. And so a lot of people, when you face better competition, Chris Sale does not age very well. Kershaw, I'm sure, is in a lot of people's best rotation of the year. For me, I think Scooball, who we'll get to soon, is just a better version of Kershaw. But if you want to argue you like Kershaw more, then you can have at it. Back-to-back S-tier starters, Corey Kluber. Pretty self-explanatory. He looks very bad if you do play him on lower difficulties. He is a guy that's made more so for Hall of Fame and Legend. Has a nasty cutter, has a decent slurve, and obviously throws an upper 90 sinker, which is always a great weapon to have. Speaking of upper 90 sinker, this Kimbrel is a slept-on card. Basically maxed out hits and Ks with a upper 90 sinker. It's just his repertoire leaves a little bit to be desired. So for me personally, I'm not going to stick him in like my bullpen, but if you do want to, I can see the argument. Another very slept-on card, this Robertson card. He throws a lot of people off. He is kind of weird. Having every pitch basically be a cutter or an away-breaking pitch is weird for a lot of people to face. And I think he's underrated personally, but I wouldn't put him in my bullpen. This is a guy I would put in my bullpen. I like this Devin Williams in particular because the cutter is significantly faster than all the other ones. I think all of his other cards threw like 85-mile-an-hour cutters. This one throws 90, so it stays a little bit away from the screwball. The thing about using Devin Williams well is you really have to tunnel. You have to place your pitches well, and you got to, take inventory of what type of opponent you're playing. He's not a guy that's going to work against everybody, and you got to know when it's the right time to bring him out. Dustin May, if he's S tier for you on the year, I can't argue with it. For me personally, he's not, but I know a lot of people really, really enjoyed this card and really liked the charisma one from the start of the year. So I see why people would argue him being S tier, and I don't mind it. Gagne, I'm not a huge fan of. He's a two-trick pony. He either throws the outlier fastball or he throws the changeup. I feel like every other pitch he throws is kind of BP. He throws a slower slider. And basically has two of the exact same pitch in the changeups, and I think he throws a splitter in a changeup or a forkball in a changeup, basically the same pitch. So I think that's redundant. I don't think he's nearly as good as a lot of people think he is. Felix, S tier, basically right there with Devin Williams. He has to be brought in against the right person. You have to pitch tunnel with him. You can't misplace pitches with him, or he's going to get rocked. He is kind of a high ceiling, high floor type of guy where you're going to be able to use him on lower difficulties very well, but also on higher difficulties, if used right, he can be effective, but in general, he's just not going to be as good on higher difficulties. This Garrett Cole is fine. I don't love the pitch mix. I don't like the fact they didn't give him outlier. I was positive when I saw this card came out he would have outlier. He doesn't. He does have a cutter, which redeems him a lot from previous years. Garrett Cole's always kind of been known for being BP. The cutter helps him out a lot. The great control helps him out a lot. I still would not put him in my personal rotation, but if you are a big Yankees fan or if you just really want to use him, I'm not going to argue against it. This card, I have to check his hits because I'm not sure if they've aged very well. He was a set one card. So 102. It's not really usable at this point, I would say. Really what I like about Grayson is the pitch mix. He has one of those very effective pitch mixes that we will get into in a minute with some other cards that are basically his exact same pitch mix, except they do it better. What I've previously liked about Grayson years past is when he goes in the stretch, his windup or his delivery completely changes. It's not like that anymore. He still does kind of have a funky delivery, and it does save him a little bit. But I would not suggest putting him in your rotation if you're trying to make the best one in the game. Another card similar to that is Greg Maddux. I'm sure a lot of people love this card, but really he is a true legend pitcher. You don't really want to be using him on Hall of Fame. You don't really want to be using him on All-Star. And if you play the wrong person on Legend, he's still going to be BP. That's just kind of the situation that Greg Maddux is always in. Just throws too slow, and his pitch mix just isn't that great. This DeGrom should be S tier by all means, but he's not. The sinker has a massive par. Again, a similar thing with cards like Bob Gibson and Ottavino, where the control just isn't really there to make them top tier options. Plus, he kind of has like what I call Corbin Burns syndrome, where like when Corbin Burns first burst on the scene and was lightening up and getting monthly cards left and right, he was a very good pitcher. But over time, people got used to him. They got used to seeing him every game. They got used to the tunnels and the sequences that people threw with him. And so they started lighting him up. And nowadays, Corbin Burns is kind of mid. That's kind of where DeGrom is after that all-star DeGrom from a couple years ago. People kind of know how you want to pitch with DeGrom. Him having a curveball that you should almost never throw really hurts him, and he just doesn't really hold up. MacArthur, I think he's solid. I don't think he's awesome. He has a 5-pitch mix. I think he might throw a splitter if I remember right. No splitter, cutter. So he's not bad. I like him a decent amount, but I'm not going to front and say he's like the best pitcher in the world. His through nines are nice. He does kind of struggle with control, and I've used him. If you miss it all on your pinpoint, he throws it right down the middle. But, that can be said for a lot of these guys. Javier Assad, if you like this card, if you play on higher difficulties where his pitch mix is basically perfect, then he can be a very valuable card to have. Lazorda, the more I've used this card, he just isn't all that. Lefty-lefty, he is very hard to hit. Lefty-lefty, he's basically Jose Alvarado, but as a starter. I just don't think he really has the pitches to get righties out like that, so I think he struggles with that. Joe Nathan, very slept on card, always super slept on in game. Throws a hard sinker, has a decent pitch mix. I always kind of like Joe Nathan cards. I just don't think they ever really crack like the best rotation in the game. Speaking of a card like that, John Donaldson, arguably the best pitcher we've gotten all year. He's 1A and 1B with Randy. I won't, hold that over your head. Randy is arguably still the best pitcher in the game, but John is right up there with him. And if he had better through nines, he would be disgusting. John Franco, decent lefty specialist. He throws a decent amount of junk, but he can be very effective if used right. He's just not up there with some of these other guys. Cueto, basically a copy and paste of Greg Maddux, somebody that he does throw a little harder than Greg Maddux, but he's going to be best utilized on Hall of Fame and Legend, mainly Legend, which is why you don't really see that card too often. Loaizaga has a good pitch mix, also kind of suffers from Corbin Burns syndrome, where everybody kind of saw the WBC Loaizaga a ton at the start of the year. And so this one, that sinker circle change combo just isn't quite as effective as it was earlier in the year, but he is still good, and he still has potential to be a good pitcher, obviously, with having an outlier sinker. Alvarado, super great lefty specialist if you're on a high difficulty. If you're on lower difficulties, you're just going to give up a million foul balls and probably a home run eventually, because that's how the game plays. Basically, he throws 3 fastballs and then a curveball. So on lower difficulties, he's going to struggle. On Legend, where you see that 1 to 2 mile an hour difference can actually be the difference in a swing and a miss or a foul ball, he is a lot more valuable. Verlander, basically that Grayson Rodriguez, the exact same pitch mix, except just utilized better, has better through nines, and so he is still a better card than that Grayson. This Kenley, maybe controversial because stats-wise he is slightly worse than the signature one. Me personally, I like the circle change more because it tunnels better with the sinker. I love a sinker circle change tunnel combo, whereas the other one just has a normal change up, which is basically BP and doesn't really move. It doesn't really tunnel great with his other pitches. So for me, I'd rather have a circle change. Kerry Wood's up there. He's a guy where if you start steamrolling with him, he can be very effective with that outlier fastball. Doesn't necessarily have the greatest pitch mix in the world to just succeed from a finesse pitcher or a contact pitcher perspective, But if you play the right person, he can be very dirty. Otherwise, he's probably going to be out of there in about 3 innings. Senga, very, very similar. Struggles with control probably a little bit more than Wood, but that funky release really helps him. He basically throws a max velo fastball. It just doesn't have outlier. So it's not going to age well into the game, and he can bottom out at like 97, and that can be the difference between giving up a home run or not. But he has that very funky delivery, throws some very good pitches, and it does save him, although he is not as good as I initially thought he would be. This Lance Lynn, very good like pitch to contact guy. Really thrives again on those higher difficulties, like a guy like Maddox would. Does throw a little harder if you like that more. This Lee Smith, I'm tentative about putting an S. Hits and Ks wise, he's great, but I think our perspective is a little skewed on him because of the charisma one at the start of the year that basically had 125 walks. This one has like 90 walks, so the control is not going to be there as much as with the other one, but the through nines are. So more of a strikeout guy than a control freak. So I'll see how it ages. He could go up to S. He could stay at A. It just kind of depends on, how well he gets utilized. Definitely better than what the charisma one would have placed, though. Lou Trevino, another one of these like budget guys like Assad, where they were very good for a time in the game, and if you still want to use them, they are still decent cards to use. But they are no longer in like the best rotation in the game. A similar card to that is this Mad Bum. Statistically, he's better than the one we had at the start of the year. But us having that one at the start of the year hurts this card a lot. A lot of people got used to seeing Mad Bum every other game. So it hurts this one, even though statistically he is still a pretty decent pitcher. Just doesn't really have the pitch mix, and his arm slot's kind of, eh. Mo, love Mo. I think him and Kenley are up there for the best righty relievers in the game. With like Felix. Felix is very hit or miss, though. You have to bring him in against the right person. Whereas these two are more against anybody. They are one of your better options out of the bullpen. There you go. Can be very good as a pitcher. Very interesting pitcher. Like the only guy in the game to throw a slurve at like 92 miles an hour. Doesn't really help him a ton as a pitcher. Every time I ever used him, he got kind of lit up. But I do see the potential, and I see why he would be good. Just not going to crack my best, bullpen and rotation in the game. This Matt Cain card, super slept on. He is solid. I don't think he's awesome, obviously, or he'd be S tier, but he runs up one of those high sinkers that hits like 95, 97, and has decent control on it. It's not awesome. A very slept on card, a card that a lot of people didn't even bother to go get, much less use. He's solid, not awesome. Strom, decent little like lefty specialist. He's not one of the better ones in the game, so I can't put him any higher than this. His through nines aren't particularly awesome. What saves him is he has a 5-pitch mix, and his delivery is a bit odd. So a lot of people find decent success with that card. Merrill Kelly, I like a lot, especially if you are somebody that plays on higher difficulties, but he is not up here with some of these guys. Pablo, extremely similar to Merrill Kelly. Just throws a little bit harder, throws like one or two different pitches than what Merrill Kelly does. They are similar cards-ish. Kelly's more about working the sinker and the cutter. Pablo's more about outward breaking pitches like slurve sliders and throwing a hard fastball. But in my opinion, they are similar cards. Corbin, he's fine. If you like having those change of pace guys in your bullpen where they throw super slow, like him or a Hoffman. Hoffman was somebody I left off the list because I don't think a lot of people utilize him super well. Corbin is that change of pace guy. I like him. He's a good lefty specialist, especially, but just not up there with a lot of these other guys. Skeens. Skeens is really, really close. Some people will be mad that I'm putting him in S. Some people will be happy about it. I think he teeters very much so between this S and A. If I made a best like starting rotation in the game, he'd be fighting for a 5 spot. He's not like a strong like person like Kluber or Leiter or John or somebody else I'm about to show you, but he is fighting for that 5 spot. And I think he's fighting for that 5 spot with a couple of people, one of them being this Pedro. He is the most consistent outlier pitcher I've used all year. He tops out at 104 all of the time, 103, 104. The problem with Pedro is the curveball, right? The curveball is basically useless. So he teeters more so in this like DeGrom territory than here. But me personally, when I use this Pedro in set 1, he was nasty for me. I think realistically he is more of a very top of A tier guy, where he is very good. And I think he's very slept on by a lot of people. A lot of people just say he sucks. I don't think he sucks. I just don't really think he's awesome. I put both Randys on here because they're both S tier. It's just what do you kind of want more? This one has better through 9s, but this one has better control in my opinion. So it really depends on what you're looking for. Realistically, if you ran the Incognito one with like the 90s boost from Pedro, he would be hands down better in my opinion. But without it, you know, either one has an argument, and I can't really put one above the other. Goose is solid. Again, has that problem with his sinker par being half the strike zone on higher difficulties. And that's what kind of holds him back, as well as people are kind of used to his pitch mix. Rob Nin, I think one of the most consistently underrated relievers of the year. I think this card came out and either a lot of people didn't want to throw stubs at it because it came out very early in the game, or they just didn't really see it with him. For me, I think his release is a little bit funky, and he throws an outlier fastball with the splitter. That's a good combination. You should know because Felix Bautista makes a living off of it. Rob Nin is basically Felix Bautista. I would urge you guys to go try Nin. Roki, I'll put in S tier. I don't know if he's going to age that great, right? He was super dominant in set 1 and most of the way through set 2. I don't know if he's going to age awesome because of his through 9s not being the greatest. You can see 109, 102, 103. It's decent. That's basically at the level of like the Team Affinity cards that we just got. So I'm not sure if he's going to age as well as he did. Also, he is more of a super high difficulty legend type pitcher because of his forkball sitting at like 90 miles an hour. I cannot tell you how many times I remember giving up home runs on that forkball when people are swinging for like the fastball or some of his like real off-speed pitches. This Raleigh Fingers is a decent card. He's not awesome. He is a control freak pitcher that will thrive better on higher difficulties against worse opponents. Like, if you gave me the ideal situation for that Raleigh Fingers, it would like be on either Legend against somebody that's not comfortable in Legend, or Hall of Fame against somebody that's not comfortable in Hall of Fame. I don't think he really has it past that. Roy Halladay, another guy where if you play on high difficulties, he's in the running for the best rotation in the game. He would be fighting for a spot with some of these guys. But me personally, when I used him on Hall of Fame, he was bad. I see the potential on Legend. Everybody always loves him on Legend. They loved him last year on Legend. So I do see the potential. Rube Foster, bottom of A tier. If you want to use this card, he's usable. He is the epitome of a junk thrower. He just throws a ton of junk up there. And your opponent will get used to it after a couple innings. So for a couple innings, I think he can be one of the more dominant pitchers in the game. But after that, you know, the shtick kind of gets old. Your opponent gets used to it. He starts rocking him. That was my experience, at least when I faced him, the couple times I ever did face him. Satchel Paige. Where's Bob Gibson? Because he's Bob Gibson. He's Bob Gibson with the longer windup and slightly worse control. That's basically exactly what he is. So if you like Bob, you'll probably like Satchel. If you hate Bob, you'll probably hate Satchel. I hated Satchel. I thought he was going to be a lot better than what he ended up being. Scoots Magoots, Scott Barlow. Very underrated reliever this year. I feel like he came out and he was in that like 10K pack and a lot of people just kind of glossed over it. Where he is a pretty decent card. Has a little bit of a weird release. And kind of shines more so on those higher difficulties. So this Ohtani basically is Bob Gibson. The control is bad. It's even worse than Bob Gibson, but the pitches are slightly better. So it's kind of preference-based. Me personally, I was a much better pitcher with this WBC Otani, so really it comes down to what pitch mix do you like more? Do you like having the slurve and the sinker, or would you rather have like I know this one has a slider. And I'm not too sure what else is different. Maybe it has like a two seam, I think, something like that. Me personally, I prefer the WBC one, but you do kind of have to pitch differently with them. Screwball, another guy going for that 5-man spot with like Holiday, Skeens, Roki, and him. I think he's just a better version of this Kershaw. In my mind, he is just Kershaw without the super slow curveball, and he tops out at like 98, 99, 100 instead of topping out at like 96, 97. So for me personally, I'd rather have Screwball, but if you do like Kershaw, I see why you like him. Glavin is, I think he's fine. I think he's more so like Matt Cain level, where he's decent, and if you're on lower difficulty, you can get away with starts with him, but do not expect this one to be the collection one from like a couple years ago, where he threw like 96, 97, 98. Because this one ain't doing it right. He's topping out at like 95, 96. He does get some decent boosts. He gets like the Pedro's boost for the 90s team, and it does make him significantly better, but it doesn't make him throw harder, right? And that's the real problem with him. Tom Terrific, I would call him just inoffensive. Like, he's a fine pitcher. He doesn't really do anything crazy. He doesn't have a crazy pitch mix. He doesn't really have an outlier. He is basically just the upgraded version of AJ Burnett, where he's a pitcher with a good pitch mix that throws a hard fastball. And that can get you a long way, right? There's not too many pitchers in the game that kind of do that to a level like Tom Seaver does. If you want generic pitcher A and you want him to be very good, then it's basically Tom Seaver. Percival, kind of slept on. The pitch mix is not very good. I will be straight up with you, but the release is funky, and a lot of people are not used to seeing Troy Percival. It can throw a lot of people off. Plus, he throws gas. I don't think he has outlier, but he does throw hard, and that is worth something in its own right. Matzik. A lot of people love him as a lefty specialist, so I will put him in A tier because I know a lot of people like him a lot as a lefty specialist. I went with this one because the difference between him and the Charisma one is barely anything, and this one has better control on his pitches. So I went with the postseason one. For me, if he had a circle change in addition to the curveball, or if he had a circle change instead of the curveball, he would probably be S tier. But with the exact pitch mix he has, I just don't really see it. I don't love it. I do realize he's better on super high difficulties. Cano, very similar to Loizaga. I think he throws more pitches than Loizaga. If not, then it's the exact same, and they both kind of have the gimmick of outlier sinker fastball, the righties. So those two are very good at it, and come to think about it, you're looking at 3 in a row that have it. Outlier sinker is very good. It's not what it used to be, but it is still very good, and it's a good tool to have. This Darvish is a good card. He's good, but I think Darvish just doesn't really have that swing and miss stuff. You're more so pitching to contact, trying to get rollovers on the slow cutter. I think that type of pitcher kind of has a ceiling on it. You don't really see any of those guys up here. You have basically the only pitch to contact guys really are like Roy Halladay here, I would say, is a pitch to contact guy. All these other guys are mostly like strikeout guys. Maybe you could argue Kershaw is a little bit pitch to contact. But really, Roy Halladay is the perfection of the pitch to contact guy. Not really Yu Darvish. And it's not Yu's fault, but, you know, he's just not messing with a guy like Halladay. Zach Gallen is fine. I don't like the pitch mix, and I don't really think his stuff is that great. His through nines aren't the most amazing in the world. I think he's usable. If you want to use the card, you can use the card. It's just I would almost rather use everybody up here over him. With maybe... Nah, I would rather use everybody up here over him. I was thinking between him and Matt Cain, they're pretty similar. But for me personally, I'd rather use Matt Cain. Britton, basically our other best lefty specialist on the year. These two guys are very similar. Loop has a stranger delivery and throws slower, but Britton is more like a strikeout lefty specialist guy. Well, they're both strike. It's hard to explain. They're both strikeout guys, two lefties. Um, Britton is a little more overpowering with like the outlier sinker that hits 100 sometimes. And the good pitch mix. If I had to pitch to a righty with one, it would probably be Loop though. You can go back and forth all day on these two as to who the better lefty specialist is, which is why they're both S tier. They're both awesome. Greinke, he's decent. I'd throw him in there with like Cole, where like I wouldn't want to use him, but if you made me use him for a game, I would feel confident that I could get a decent start out of him. Just doesn't really have the best pitch mix, and he used to tip his pitches. I'm not sure if he still does. Zach Little, I am a big fan of. I think he's not quite to Rob Nin level because he's not throwing an outlier fastball, but he does throw a hard fastball with a sinker and I believe a 5-pitch mix with a splitter. So that is a huge, huge pitcher. I'm a big fan of this card. I don't know if I would put him in the best bullpen in the game, but I think he's in the running, and I think he's a decent shout to have. Wheeler, super slept on card, very similar to like a Matt Cain, where he is just a righty that throws a hard sinker and has a decent enough complementary mix to where he can win you some games and be a decent pitcher with him. And I think I'm pretty happy with that for the most part. But yeah, guys, that is basically it for the pitching tier list. Let me know what you would change, who could get bumped, who should go down. If I missed anybody other than like Nolan Ryan, Rob Dibble, Class A guys, I just personally cannot rate that high because of the ceiling on guys like that. Let me know, right? I think this is a pretty good list. I went through all the starters, all the relievers, picked out everybody I thought looked very usable. Obviously in their respective roles, right? Like you shouldn't use like Aaron Loop or Alvarado or certain guys against righties, and there's a niche and there's a role for a lot of these guys. But until next time, guys, peace.